everyone, and welcome to our third annual Autism Hope Summit. I am so excited about our next speaker. You are going to just love what we're talking about. I'm going to be talking to Alex Doman, and we're going to be talking about music listening therapy, a sound approach to help your child on the autism spectrum. Now, if you are sitting there thinking, music therapy, what is that? Oh, you are in such for a treat. So thank you for being here today, Alex.
I'm stoked to be here, Kristen. Thanks for having me.
I've known you, I was thinking about this the other day. I'm trying to think, I feel like I've known you well over 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and I love all the different things that you educate people on, but one of the first things I ever learned from you was music listening therapy. So I'm really excited that for those that are watching, because we'll have over 160 countries tuning into this, and so they might never have heard of music listening therapy. So this is a great topic. But before we start, you know, why are you so passionate about what you do and helping the autism community?
Well, Kristen, as you know, and as we'll share with the parents and professionals that are here with us for the summit, I'm third generation in my family to be in the field of human development and brain training. My grandfather was a rehabilitation physician and one of the pioneers of early brain injury treatment and actually treating kids on the autism spectrum. My father is the next generation. Robert Doman is the founder of the National Association for Child Development, and working, kind of growing up in the brain business, if you will. As a kid, I grew up with all kinds of kids with cerebral palsy and Down syndrome and autism and various challenges and various gifts. So, you know, these kids were like any other kids to me. They were the kids in my life, and I watched on the knee of my granddad and my dad and other family members their commitment to helping these children attain their potential. And so it's in the Doman blood. And I have a particular interest in the applications of music and sound and their therapeutic benefits for people. So I started researching this with my father at NACD back in 1993. Did a few years of research, worked with about 2,000 clients personally, understanding, really getting my fingers into this clinical work, and then was very excited to develop with the team a new form of therapy that would be very accessible and very effective and enjoyable for our clients. So it's just a life's mission, and I love what it does to help people.
Well, I love that I learned about it so long ago, and it's been a huge part of our life. You know, for those that, that are listening, why did you start Advanced Brain Technologies?
Well, often businesses start because there's a need and there's a problem that needs to be solved. And my family's work has long involved teaching parents, the world's greatest experts on their kids, how to do therapy at home, so that children can get the frequency, intensity, and duration of input that's needed to create meaningful, lasting change. So in that, we wanted a music listening therapy that would be very pleasant, that children would want to do, that would be easy for parents to implement with a professional's oversight, and would be cost effective. So rather than having the cost of having to go to a clinic and do these therapies and take time off and travel somewhere, that we could have a child in their natural environment where they feel most safe and comfortable, with mom or dad or family members helping to administer the therapy, which is quite easy, but it was really just making something very accessible and effective that took less time, took less money, and was more enjoyable and easier to do.
And now, when we think about music therapy, I know there's lots of different modalities out there, and as you said, you were looking to fill a gap that wasn't there. What is music listening therapy? Because, often people think, is it just listening to classical music? Is it listening to music that's been kind of altered? Can we give that kind of a deeper understanding?
Yeah, that's, thank you for that question, Kristen. And it's an important one to ask. First of all, there's music therapy, which is a very different field than what we're in. So often people will just use the term music therapy when music is used in any therapeutic modality. And that's a specific discipline with music therapists that have done undergraduate and graduate or doctoral work in a specific method of active music making with a patient in a clinical setting for very specific goals. What we're doing with music listening therapy is taking pre-recorded music. In our case with the listening program and In Time, which we'll speak about, pre-recorded music that we've done the original arrangements or compositions on, done the recordings in high definition, very high quality sound, done in unique ways so that we can then alter the music after we've recorded it. And that alteration is called acoustic modifications. So the way to think about this is music and sound have some primary components. We have the volume or the amplitude, how loud or soft the music is. We have the frequency, which we think of as pitch. Are there high tones or are there low tones? We have the temporal aspects of music. So what's the timing or the beats per minute, the time intervals within the music, and then the spatial aspect of the sound. Where is the sound in relation to myself? And what we do is we record the music to a very specific band of frequencies, depending what our goals are for the particular recording. And then we modify that music to enhance those sound frequencies so they have more opportunity to stimulate the brain for the specific benefits those are intended toward, to make the brain better recognize changes in volume for listening, discrimination, and language skills, to understand the timing of the music, because timing is everything in the brain, right? The brain's made up of several clocks, and every action and interaction we have is very time dependent. So we work with those timing elements within the sound, and then the spatial understanding to understand kind of the environment, what I'm listening to. So the music is designed, scientifically designed, to have specific benefits for the brain and to affect specific areas in the brain, and is followed according to a schedule, a structured protocol that's personalized for each individual. So think of it as intentional music that is designed for a specific set of therapeutic outcomes.
And who does it benefit? I mean, obviously I know this answer, but for those listening, you know, it's not just for our kids, right?
Well, truth be told, I did a 30-minute session before the interview. And, you know, I've been listening for a lot of years. And I did the session to ground myself, to focus myself, and be in a ready state for what we are doing here and to set my intention for this conversation. So as we look at who it can benefit, if we have ears and a brain and are living, there is some opportunity to improve our function, our brain function. So it may be sensory processing, how we're processing touch, sound, and sight. The executive functions, so the control of the brain, planning in the brain, our focused attention, how we receive language and express language, learning skills, social and emotional function, stress regulation, motor skills, and memory. So if you think of music listening therapy as a primer for the brain to help support lower brain structures that are responsible for automatic responses to the environment, and higher brain structures which involve planning and thinking in response to our environment, the listening program supports different therapies that work in these areas and stands alone to support improved growth in these areas.
Now, why specifically for autism spectrum? Why do we see such benefit?
Well, there's a lot of opportunity for improvement, specifically in, let's first of all start with any individual with sensory dysfunction. And we know that in autism spectrum disorders, there's a spectrum of sensory dysfunction. And just to think about that, you know, sensory processing is how the brain takes in and responds to sensory input from the environment. So what we see, what we smell, what we taste, what we hear in response to our movement, in response to gravity, in response to the proprioceptive functions of the individual. And are we processing that input normally? Do we have a hypo-responsitivity, meaning we're under-responsive to the input and can't respond to it? Or is there a hypersensitivity to it where it overstimulates us and becomes overwhelming? So in autism, we'll see hyposensitivities and hypersensitivities in response to a sensory environment. So one of the things that music listening therapy does, and specifically the listening program, is to help that system regulate sensory input, to help modulate it so we're responding to things in our environment as we should normally. So case in point, and this is probably one of the most common traits that we see with kids in autism, is a hypersensitivity to sound.
They're always covering their ears.
They may be covering their ears. They may be getting aggressive when certain sounds are in the environment. We may actually see attention really get interrupted, or actually see kids shut down. So you can see a child act as if deaf to protect themselves from the sounds and the stressors that are in our environment. Now, it's natural when something is very intrusive to have a response like, oh, I don't like that. Right? That's normal. But it's when sounds that wouldn't bother you or I affect a sensory sensitive individual, and the response is not appropriate for what's happening. Then we say, okay, maybe there's a hypersensitivity. Sometimes it's called misophonia, phonophobia, hypersensitivity to sound, but there is this reaction to the sound which is not appropriate for what it is. And what the listening program helps to do, and actually I've done research on this with Dr. Jay Lucker at Howard University, who's in the Department of Communication Sciences, is we have identified through the literature and our research that a lot of what we're seeing is not a sensitivity to sound, it is an emotional reactivity to the sounds that are present. So, and there's a very important distinction there. And we can train that emotional reactivity and help the sounds become something that's pleasant and welcoming and that we can benefit from, rather than shutting us down and putting us into fight and flight responses. So you want to go a little bit deeper into this?
Yeah, so as I was thinking, I was like remembering Jackson when we were first getting into this. And I was actually thinking, I think it was like almost 13 years ago, because he just turned 16 last week. So I know he.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? I think he was 3 when I met you, right? So that just like mind like exploded. I don't know how I have a 16-year-old, but other than that. But I remember one of the things, because there is a lot of children that are hypersensitive, especially putting things on their head, and like my son, would cover his ears a lot. And I remember going to you, and I know we've told this story at different points, but I know we haven't told it for a long time. I remember you saying, "Oh, put these headphones on," and I remember looking at you like, I don't know if he's going to get those things on his head, and you're like, trust me. And I just met you, right? And I was like, right. Yeah, okay, I'll try, and because I was going to try anything that made sense, and this to me was like kind of a no-brainer. And so you said, no, I promise, like once he starts to feel a certain way, it's just his whole body is just going to start to relax. And so I remember like at first you said, just turn the music on, the headphones, and just kind of put it on gradually. And I remember, and I've said this before, if anyone's ever heard me, it was as though it was like melted butter, or melting butter. It was just like, he just just melted right into it, and in that moment, he started loving classical music. He always asked and wanted it. Anytime he started to get upset, like that would be the first thing, almost like he knew to take care of himself. And I can even remember being on an airplane once and thinking, well, he's super sensitive to sound, so I'm going to just bring my, classical music, from ABT and put it on. And I remember I said, oh, do you want your classical music? Because that's what I just called it. And he very well behaved, thank goodness. Back in the day, especially, it seemed easier than it is during puberty, because that's a whole other topic. But, I remember leaving the airplane, and at that moment, he was eating cultured vegetables and listening to classical music. And this lady, she's like, you have the most sophisticated child I have ever seen. And he had like almost no language, like super limited. Like he could ask for classical music, he could ask for cultured vegetables. Like these were some of our first words. And I remember, and Jackson's like smiling, you know, and like she said hi, he said hi. I'm like, come on, hurry, let's get off the airplane. We faked her out, you know. And like I just remember being like amazed, like, oh, that was like my, like that one. I'm sure I've had others, but that's like one that stands out as like, oh, I'm a good mom moment, you know, like my kid likes classical music and cultured vegetables. But, you know, I don't know, you know, I obviously I've learned the science behind this, and, you know, parents out there, to me, it was like, okay, I learned it. Great. I just wanted to know why it worked, how it was going to work, how it was going to benefit my kiddo, because, you know, and you can't go wrong with, in my mind, you can't go wrong with your music. I also want to say one other thing. And I won't say the company one because I just can't remember what it was called, but I remember taking him somewhere else, and I remember telling you this, like the reason he won't put these headphones on is I had tried this quote unquote other music listening, whatever it was, and I remember them putting him on this table and like putting this like headphones on him, and it was like this loud like kind of noise, and then there was like heavy, like I don't want to say heavy metal, but let's just say rock and roll, but like loud, and then partially not here, partially over here. And at that moment, he no longer wanted to wear headphones, and I can't blame him.
Right.
So we talk a little bit, as we are talking about the different, I'll go back a little bit about music listening therapy, especially since there's going to be so many countries watching. I want them to understand that it's all not created equally, and maybe talk a little bit about that.
No, you know, when we got into this, music listening therapy had been a field since the 1950s, right? And methods started in Europe with one physician, then another physician that followed. And we at NACD had thousands of clients do these therapies all over the world over the years and monitor their response to them. Then I trained and began to apply methods myself. And what you described is one of the main reasons that we developed TLP, because I was doing what I would call more intensive, invasive listening therapy with children, and finding it was putting them into fight and flight responses. So I was working with more intensive, invasive listening therapies that I was observing were actually putting children into fight or flight response, because the modifications to the music were quite harsh. And maybe we step back. I think sometimes we think something has to be painful. It has to taste bad. It has to be hard to make a change, right? And, you know, take your spoonful of castor oil. Yeah. It doesn't have to be that. So there was this perception that it had to be really intense to force a change in the brain. So we didn't like the responses that we were seeing, and so there had to be a better way. So how can we have a kinder, gentler, more approachable, inviting music listening therapy, which really set the foundation for our whole approach to the listening program. So we wanted to create something, and this is very important in a distinction of TLP, is we incorporate something called, in the listening, an ABC modular design. So as you know, a listening session is 15 minutes once or twice a day, or 30 minutes once a day. That's broken into 15-minute modules. And they have 3 5-minute parts. There's a warm-up, a workout, and a cool-down. It's just like physical exercise. You don't jump into a heavy, hardcore weightlifting routine without stretching, without getting your heart rate up a bit slowly and easing into that. And you also want to cool down after your intensive training session. So we ease the children and adults, because this is for all ages, into their listening sessions, and then gradually increase the novelty and the challenge to the brain. We take it to a state that's quite challenging, but then we gradually bring back down over 15 minutes. So we meet the individual where they're at, we gradually challenge the brain, and then we take them back out. So every listening session is designed that way, and that's unique to the listening program. Something else that's quite unique is that the music is created for it. It isn't licensed classical music that was created for entertainment. This is music created for therapeutic benefits, with a whole team medical doctors, working with therapists, working with sound engineers, working with musicians, and every moment of that music is created for a specific outcome. So it's very intentionally designed to do what it does. It's gorgeous. So you want to hear it. You crave it. As we know, the brain has a mechanism that makes us desire certain things, right? So, and with a lot of our kids, we see it too. A lot of our stimming behaviors come from feeding that reward feedback loop. Well, the music can positively feed the reward feedback loop and create an intrinsic motivation to want to do it. So that when you put these headphones on, right, these look familiar?
They do.
That you see these and you anticipate something great is going to happen when I put them on. And the moment the music starts to play, you go to a different place. You go into a state of focused relaxation, and the music takes over. You get to escape and do art, relax, just enjoy the process, and then move back in to whatever you were doing in your day.
Well, what I also love about, you just showed the headphones, this is what, anyone that's watching, this is like what got me super excited when I first learned. There's something called bone conduction, and I don't know why I get so darn excited about this piece.
Sure.
Okay, so yeah, that little button right there, it's not even a button, it's like a little vibrator thingabobber that goes
That's right.
Right? And it's so cool because so many of our kiddos have issues with their middle ear, and that just bypasses everything. And how I often think, and you can laugh at me because this is how I think about it. So when you plug your ears and you kind of talk and you hear your voice and you kind of hear that echoey kind of noise in your head from your own voice, that is bone conduction. And so it's like, am I wrong? That's how I think.
No, you're right. I mean, we have two ways that we hear. We hear ourselves when we speak through bone conduction, primarily. Then we hear the reflections of our voice in our environment through air conduction. We hear others through air conduction. So we have two natural pathways of hearing. And actually, we learn how to hear and listen in utero through bone conduction.
Isn't that so cool?
Right. So from 16 to 20 weeks in utero, the infant is developing, the fetus, its listening skills, listening to everything happening inside of the mother and in the environment. And the first sensory system to fully develop is that auditory vestibular system that's being nourished and growing the brain from movement and from sound. And it's through bone conduction that hearing first develops and how we first experience sound in the world. And it's not until after birth and we leave and we enter this amazing environment around us and we're out of this safe little cocoon that we hear through air conduction. So developmentally, it's very important to use bone conducted sound for children that maybe have had developmental delays, as our kids on the spectrum can have. And if there's delayed communication and emotional connection and challenges in this way, we're going back to a very foundational sensory stage. So we provide a very safe foundation through bone conduction combined with air conduction. But the bone conduction is doing something very interesting, and that is providing stimulus through the vagus nerve. So that's a cranial nerve that connects the gut brain, right? You talk a lot about the gut in the summit, to this brain. And it is that super highway of sensory communication, and we're able to ground that emotional gut brain with sound and to help improve that regulation through the bone conduction. So it's a way to access the autonomic nervous system, to help create a relaxed state, to help individuals go out of fight or flight, and it just feels good. So, and all it is vibration. It's the sound coming through this bone conductor in addition to the headphone on the side, and it's the same stimulus, it's the same music, but we feel this and we hear this.
I love that. And I think that's why Jackson kind of melted like butter when it was all on him. And I didn't have to worry, was there a middle ear issue or can he hear it? I knew that no matter what, he was getting some piece of that. So can we talk about some of the benefits? I know with Jackson, we saw fine motor skills increase, attention increase, calming and anxiety increase, or anxiety decrease. So, what what benefits, from the thousands and thousands of children listening, of all ages, what are some top benefits you've seen?
I'm gonna talk a little outside of the box of, generally we talk about kids. Mm-hmm. And we had the most amazing case report in the past few months from a 54-year-old man on the autism spectrum. Wow. And you'll see it on our website, this beautiful picture of him with his bone conduction headphones on and this gorgeous smile. Now, what's significant about that smile and the reports that we had is initial J was very aggressive, and he doesn't have language, difficulty expressing his emotions, and when he feels threatened, when he feels uncomfortable, he gets violent and aggressive. And he's not able to use his words, so he uses his physicality to respond to what's happening around him. And what the reports were from the therapists, he is in an adult institution where he works and has jobs and social interaction and relationships, but he changed, he transformed, he became calm. He was able to begin to express himself in new ways, and not with physicality, but with caring and in a gentle nature. He became more approachable, and the staff working with him felt more comfortable and safer because he felt safer. So why that's important is we have to remember that brain plasticity allows all this to happen, right? The brain can change. The brain changes in response to its environment, and it isn't just in our kids. So, if we have older parents with adults on the spectrum, we've seen many, many, many case studies with beautiful responses to music listening therapy. But let's step back to our kids, okay? What are we looking to improve? With autism spectrum disorders, we're looking at abnormal responses to the environment. We're looking at communication, social and emotional regulation, focus, and we're looking at learning. Across the spectrum, we see benefits. Now, the question is, what's the mechanism of action? What's happening? And the answer is, we in the field don't entirely know. So let's maybe step back and think about this. If we feel stressed, right? If we haven't slept well, if we haven't eaten well, our attention is affected, our resilience is affected, our ability to communicate, to think, to process what's happening is severely impacted. So when we put on the headphones, we do the 15 to 30 minutes of music a day, and we go through the developmental progression. We're going in and working from the bottom up, from the brainstem to the pons, to the midbrain, to the cortex, to provide very gentle global stimulation to not only the auditory regions in the brain, but the associated areas. So all of the areas of the brain are benefiting from the music, and we're supporting all of these areas of function. So think of it as a primer for everything else that we're doing. So occupational therapists will use the listening program in conjunction with sensory integration therapy. ABA therapists or families doing Sunrise will use the listening program prior to treatment sessions. Speech language pathologists use it in conjunction with speech and language therapy. We can go on and on. It's an adjunct. We see applications of the listening program in combination with HBOT, with hyperbaric oxygen therapy, and go across the board. So it's a great adjunct to other interventions, but as a standalone, it is a general support for the brain, primarily working on the autonomic nervous system and then also the central nervous system.
What I love about it too is it's home-based. So
right.
I remember when I was telling the story that I had to take Jackson, to this clinic place, there was nothing for me to do. I mean, I had to stay. I actually drove out of state with my son, and I had to stay there. I think it was 10 or 15 days. I can't remember. It was so long ago. But it was their way of, like, I had to be there to do it. There was nothing for me to be able to buy or do at home. And what I loved about learning about your program way back when is that I love that it was something that I could do. I could implement this into any aspect of my life. I've been able to train all of the people that worked in my life
Right.
with our and again, it wasn't anything I had to really think a lot about, because it was like, oh, classical music. Okay, let's pretend that I don't understand any of the science. Let's pretend that I don't actually know if it's really going to work. One thing I knew, it wasn't going to hurt.
Right.
And yet it was something that has been such a blessing in our son's life, because the fact that, how cool is this? I want people to think about this. How cool is it that our children can be introduced to beautiful classical music on top of it actually being beneficial and therapeutic to them? And so I want to talk about some of the things that I know you have a little bit of research on, the listening program and toilet training, which, oh my goodness gracious, I can't imagine people not sitting there going, excuse me, wait, what did you say? Toilet training. Like, Jackson was potty trained at 8. Let me tell you, it was 8 long years, and it's almost the equivalent of having like 5 kids. And I swear I got a $500 a month raise when he was finally toilet trained. So I want you guys to listen to this part. Okay, sorry, I get very excited.
Now, well, this was fascinating. You know, for those that are listening, we've trained thousands and thousands of providers working globally that have helped over 1 million families and counting, right? So it's amazing the reach that this has had. And this is the 19th year of the listening program. So there's a lot of history and a lot of research now, much more than the beginning. But we started getting anecdotal reports. As you know, Kristen, the music is organized in different sound frequencies. The low frequencies, which are subcortical brain areas support. So the low sounds that are very grounding and calming and more physical, right? And then we call that the green zone. Then the orange zone are the speech and language frequencies, you know, where communication happens. And the red zone are the higher frequencies, which is more related to executive function and creativity and higher thought. And we had a lot of reports when families were in the green zone. This, what we may call sensory integration, grounding, sensory processing zone. The kids were potty training that hadn't been successful at potty training during this period of the program. So enough of these reports were circulating in the provider community that a nurse in the UK that worked for the National Health Service, the NHS, decided to do a research study. Now, it just happened that that nurse was the UK's leading expert on continence therapy, especially kids. And she conducted a study funded by the NHS to explore if the listening program using bone conduction would be an effective means to help assist kids in being better able to toilet train. Now, emphasis on better able, okay, not to successfully do it. So they took, I believe it was 11 or 12 kids, ages 7 to 11. And they did a, what we call a cycle, or a 25-hour regime of the listening program, which happened over the course of 10 weeks to see if maybe behaviorally they would be more ready to toilet train. Now, the kids that were selected were primarily on the autism spectrum. They may have had some comorbid diagnosis or other needs. There were a lot of kids on the spectrum. And over the course of the protocol, 7 out of 11 of the kids toilet trained.
Wow. Wow.
They didn't have an expectation that any would, just that they would be more ready. Now, these were the kids that were not successful in the NHS continence protocol, meaning they were the toughest cases. They were not responsive to intervention. Mm-hmm. So let's see if this can work. So 7 out of 11 over the course responded with successful toilet training. The other 4 improved. And as they did another course of treatment, they all successfully toilet trained.
To me, that's like, as a parent, that's one of those hugest victories. And it's something that I know when my son, you know, now I don't know how come my son got potty trained. It was one of those things where I tried and tried and tried, and then his dad was like, okay, you pee in a toilet. And he's like, oh, I don't even know what clicked. It was like, clearly nothing I did clicked. And it was
Jackson was just making the decision. That was behavioral.
He did the same thing with like his bike riding. Like I would get on the ground and like be like, come on. And then dad walked out and was like, foot, pedal, go. I'm like, Okay, I literally
Yeah.
set the ball up for this for like 2 years. Like, but I don't. But I just know that those were big, big moments, and for any family out there, I mean, trust me. I mean, it was 8 years, and I know some of you are still on that journey, way later than that. But I know that it's totally possible. And when I hear stories like this, it's just those are moments where you go, okay, I'm not giving up. I may not have to change diapers forever. And, we don't know why our kids' brains click at certain points and why, one thing works and for one child and it doesn't work for the other. But I've used this analogy before. It's like setting up, if you're playing volleyball, you're setting up, for the person to spike it. And
Right.
you don't know why. And I love that. And I want to talk a little bit about, the evidence base, because you're going to have, parents out there going, well, okay, it sounds all nice and dandy and, but really, what's the evidence that any of this is going to work?
Well, first of all, it's not going to work for everybody. And not every kid that does a listening program is going to successfully toilet train.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think that that's very important. As the leader of the team that created the program and who runs the company, I'll be here to tell you it's not going to help all your kids.
Mm-hmm.
It simply isn't. Do we have the potential of significant outcomes for your kids in some area? Absolutely. So let's talk about the evidence base. There are different degrees of evidence base today, and evidence-based practice has become a very important topic for good reason. Now, the first thing that I'll say is, Kristen, if we waited until we had double-blind, placebo-controlled, gold standard clinical trials with a listening program with children with autism, I would be here to tell you we would not have helped a child yet.
Wow.
There is a point in which you have to decide that the method, the theory, and the approach is sound, that it's, first of all, safe, and that we begin to practice in a responsible way. It's one of the reasons why we required providers to work with families to oversee the program, that we certify and that we train to hold their hand, that are trained therapists that are going to be an expert in their own area, but also become an expert in TLP to assist them. So we'll begin with that foundation. The other listening methods over the decades had shown enough benefit to say, yes, there is here, there's something to work from. So as we modified the program, we did internal studies first. Okay, internal trials, meaning we organized the research. And we did control group and experimental group to see what the benefits would be in different populations, and they were very good. And we had enough success that we felt comfortable bringing this to parents. Then as we brought this to parents and trained practitioners, independent researchers began running studies. So when we talk about an evidence base, we are not funding studies. We are not designing the studies. We're not responsible for the studies. This is independent research. So now we have studies published in peer-reviewed journals, including Occupational Therapy International, International Journal of Rehabilitation, one of the Canadian educational studies that goes out from the Canadian government, Autism and Science Digest, and a number of others. And what the studies are showing is there are benefits for children on the spectrum, primarily with sensory processing issues and hypersensitivity to sound. So that's where we're seeing the greatest evidence base. So kids that are sensory sensitive are being desensitized to a point in which they can respond normally to sensorial input in their environment, more so after doing the listening program rather than prior to, the post results. What we see across the anecdotal reports is quite great, as we've shared. But the listening program is used in hundreds of schools across the U.S. and thousands across the world. It's used in some of the leading pediatric hospitals and autism programs around the world by some of the leading docs that specialize in autism treatment in the world, because over time, it's become known as something safe, something that it has a reasonable impact in terms of the expectation of there being a benefit, not a guarantee, and it does no harm, most importantly.
And I love the fact that, like I said before, I love the classical music aspect of it. I think it's so beautiful. I think as a parent, getting to listen to, you have something called sound health, which we'll talk about in a minute, but just being able to have that calmness in your home. Is there other programs that you use other music for?
Well, we've done something in the past few years, which I think you know about, which is In Time. And music listening therapy is generally thought of as just classical music. Because of the structure of classical music, we really know how to work with those elements to do what we're trying to achieve. But we had providers and parents wanting something more rhythmically based. And we spent years working on building a program and finding the best approach to it. And after early research, spent 5 years formally working on the project, 3 years recording and producing the project for what became In Time, which is the only rhythm-based music listening therapy in which our composer, Nacho Aramani, who's our composer and our multi-instrumentalist, occupational therapist Sheila Allen, who has a background in psychology and specializes in sensory integration therapy, and myself work together. And this is an amazing program. So it's built on, it's an extension of the listening program, first of all. So it follows the ABC modular design. It follows the frequency progressions that we've talked about. So all of the same models, but rather in classical music, it's rhythmically based. So it's drumming. And it's drumming often combined with melodic music, and over 100 different instruments have been used. So you actually listen for 9 minutes to this very foundational timing and rhythm-based music. And after the 9 minutes, you spend a couple minutes relaxing and integrating. Then the kids can do body percussion exercises. And they begin to practice the rhythms they've been hearing. And then we have a therapeutic drum. So they go from the body percussion to the therapeutic drum, which we worked with Dr. Remo Belli at Remo Drum to actually design specifically to be a very universal therapeutic tool with our kids. And then they move into drumming. So it has an active component, and it's incredibly powerful. So much different than TLP, structurally the same, but the approach and the music, so you've got piano with drumming and guitar with drumming and some voice, and it's just amazing.
Now with traditional TLP, it's 15 minutes twice a day or once for 30 minutes. Now with In Time, what's the time frame for that one?
So 9 minutes once or twice a day, or 18 minutes once a day. So there's shorter duration because the drumming is actually, the rhythm-based music is more demanding than the classical. And in our early research and development, the sessions were 15 minutes, and we found that they were actually too intensive. So we dropped down to 9 minutes and then added that integration and body percussion and drumming as an extension after the listening to keep working with the effects.
And how do you know which one to choose?
Well, that's an interesting question. That's where the provider comes in. So, the listening program has 4 core programs. Our Spectrum protocol, the Achieve protocol, level 1, and now In Time. So for our clients that have more motor challenges, okay, so they're dysynchronous, they may have more kind of timing and coordination and balance challenges, we will tend to lean toward In Time over the classical music in TLP. And also for like kids like Jackson that have been listening for years to the listening program, they're ready for a new challenge. They're ready for some novelty. And we bring that in. And now we do cross-training. So we combine the classical with the rhythm of In Time, doing TLP and In Time in the same day with the same child as a more advanced protocol. So they begin intermixing. And something that's a pretty exciting development is we now, as you know, the listening program and In Time come on an iPod. And now we use an iPod Touch, and we build custom playlists for the families. So the provider helps choose what programs we'll use over time. Then they can intermix the protocols with the help of the provider on that iPod.
And that's what I love about it. It's just so easy. It's like there's an iPod, which we all kind of know what that is, right? And I don't know, maybe other countries out there, but I know that
They're
accessible.
all over.
And then they have, you know, and the headphones that you saw. I
Yeah.
mean, that's basically it. I mean, it's not, unless you do the end time and then you get this really cool looking drum.
Yeah.
Drum is really pretty, and as a woman, I'm like, ooh, I like that.
Right? It's nice.
I was like, oh, he gets to play with that. That's so cool. And so, you know, and that's what I love, you know. And so, how do families access the whole program, the listening program? How do
Yeah.
they?
So that's a great question. One thing we didn't touch on is you can now do the listening program online.
Oh, that's right. I forgot because
Yeah.
I have everything, so I forgot. You can do.
So you can have an iPod Touch with everything preloaded on it, or you can get a subscription. And with a subscription, you pay month to month or year to year versus a one-time purchase of the program. And all the different programs, except for In Time right now, and that's coming, are available in that platform. So you subscribe and it's streaming. And there's an iOS app for your Apple device and an Android app for your Android devices, or you can listen on the computer. And all you do is log in, press play, and whatever you're supposed to listen streams to you.
And you just plug in your headphones, correct?
You just plug in your headphones to your device. So, you know, really it's as easy as speaking with a provider. So if you know a provider of the listening program or In Time, speak to them about how the programs may benefit their children. And there are different intake processes that are used depending on the background of that provider to kind of match a program for the family. If you don't have a provider near you, you contact us at Advanced Brain Technologies, and we actually have providers that we recommend and work directly with that'll help you. So they do an intake which can be done remotely or in person. They select the programs and build your custom playlist or create your TLP Online account, order your headphones, and then we choose protocol and a schedule. And then once you get going, the provider will work with you. They'll interact with you weekly to start, and then kind of move to every couple weeks, then to monthly. And the more you get a handle on the program, the less contact you need with them. But over time, they're training you to become the expert as the parent. But they give you a strong helping hand and a resource to count on to understand what to do, how to make program modifications, to know what the right activities are to do during listening, and as things come up to answer your questions and to help you out. So really, really easy to get going. And once you've got it, all you do is put on headphones, press play, and do your listening. It's very simple.
Do you have to use, because I actually don't know this one, because I didn't know I knew that you had where you can buy the subscription and stuff, but because I have the equipment, I didn't really pay much attention to that part, right?
Right.
So can you buy, like, can it just be any headphones if they can't get the bone connection, or do they?
So it's a great question. And as we know, the bone conduction headphones are custom made, they're hand built, they're not inexpensive. They are a therapeutic tool that's an investment for a family, and not every family can utilize those. Mm-hmm. But it is important that you use a pair of headphones that we have tested and approved. Mm-hmm. So when you do the online subscriptions, you actually order your headphones as part of the process, and there's approved headphones that start very, very economically, and kind of a midpoint of a very high-end non-bone conduction headphone, and then the Waves bone conduction headphones from ABT. So there's a range to meet different budgets.
I love that. Yeah. That to me, because you didn't have that a long time ago. I'm just saying. So you guys right now are really lucky, because back in the day, it was like you got this or you got nothing. And so
well, and that's, you know, and I think what's important is this is not a static method.
No.
You know, what the programs change, the music changes and builds on the DNA of what the listening program is. Mm-hmm. And as we learn and grow and work with these thousands of practitioners and countless families, we're modifying in response to those experiences, but also in response to people's needs.
That's what I love about you guys, though. I mean, that to me, back in the day, that's what you had, because it was the best, you know? And then you figured out another best, and then you figured out another best. And that's because there's a saying that says, if you stay stagnant, you die, right?
Right.
And so
you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah, you're constantly reinventing. And the other thing is you're listening to feedback, because there's people out there that said, you know what, I really want to do this. I just can't afford it. And now you made a way. Plus technology continue to grow, because honestly, back in the day, we didn't really have the availability the way we have with iPads and everything else.
Yeah. Well, it's, we started working on this in actually the early 2000s. It
Wow.
wasn't until there was a ubiquity of smart devices
Mm-hmm.
that data connections and data costs were significant, had the bandwidth, for a low enough cost that you could actually stream. So if you have an internet connection that can stream Netflix, you can stream TLP and just do a month-to-month plan and get started.
I've always loved talking with you. I mean, as people know, he's one of my dear friends. I absolutely respect him. I learned so much from him. He's been a mentor of mine. I can't say enough great things about him. And so, but I want to tell you guys, he was on last year's summit and the year before, but we were talking about all different stuff because
Right.
this guy knows a ton of stuff. And so if you guys want to have Alex in your living room, and I say this on every single speaker, so you've heard me say this, let's say that your significant other didn't get a chance to listen this week and watch this week. Let's say that maybe you had a family member that you're like, gosh, I really wish they could hear this because I really want them to understand about this. Here's the cool thing. All you have to do is go to autismhopesummit.com. That's autismhopesummit.com. And you can buy the whole package with over 25 top experts in their field, and you can have it forever. Now, here's the other cool part. You basically, when you buy certain packages, you get last year's summit and the year before, because this is our third summit. And then all the money that we raise goes back to the Autism Hope Alliance, which goes into our nutritional scholarship fund. And so somebody earlier today had said to me, they said, it's a no lose, because I said it's a win-win. They said, no, it's a no lose. And so I absolutely love, that's my new saying now, it's a no lose. I love it. And so it's an easy thing to do. And, we're here to help. And that's why we're bringing you this summit, because we know many of you can't go to conferences because whether it be through finances or work, or you just can't get there because of child's, care, what have you. Now you have all this in the comfort of your own home. So the other really awesome thing is Alex is giving something really cool away. You guys are giving the Sound Health music sampler, and this includes one track from each of the 10 Sound Health music albums. And I know we haven't talked about Sound Health, so let's talk a little bit about Sound Health and how amazingly awesome this gift is.
Well, Sound Health is a collection of classical music that has been intentionally recorded to have therapeutic benefits. So you have music to relax and music to distress and music for thinking and music for concentration and music for inspiration and so on, that are set in specific frequency ranges. So you can put the music on in the background or as a primary focus, and you live with this music, right? It becomes part of your life. So that sampler gives you an experience of all the different albums, and that in and of itself can have a very significant therapeutic impact. So we really hope everyone enjoys it.
I'm so excited for them. We love our Sound Health, and so Jackson knows how to use his own iPad or iPod, and he picks what he wants to listen to at night when he goes to sleep. I mean, you guys, this is a huge treat for you guys, and so I'm so grateful that you were able to do that for everyone. Now, final message for people that are, they've been on the spectrum, they've had the diagnosis of their child on the spectrum for quite some time, or maybe they're brand new in the diagnosis. What message can you leave with them?
Don't get hung up on the diagnosis, first of all, okay? Your child is not a label. Your child is an individual. Your child has a unique potential that is unknown what their capacity is of what they can achieve. And you as a parent are equipped as the world's greatest expert on your kid. And trust your guts, trust your instincts. Go to people you feel comfortable with for answers, and know there is no one answer for your child. It's going to be hard work in recovering your child and helping them to get to wherever you may want them to be. I can tell you in my life that I have many friends on the spectrum that you may never know were on the spectrum. And what's possible for your child is unknown. And I just encourage you to look at them as the unique individuals they are, to love them and afford them every opportunity within your means to help them reach their great potential.
Love that message. I do. And, for all of you guys watching, we always just say never give up and just keep on digging. And keep on making people figure out answers. If the doctor doesn't know, go to a different doctor, or tell this doctor, hey, here's this study. You know, make the teachers learn, make the therapists learn. Just never, ever, ever give up, because progress for one of our kiddos provides hope for all of our children at any age. So until next time, guys, bye.